Do Muslims have a crisis in belonging?
Only 8% had a positive sentiment of the future in this country. We do feel the ramifications of what we put out, and it weighs heavy on my thought process as well. But we feel as though, again, ultimately, these numbers help Muslim organizations support their own. We can't control the narrative on every single finding. The launch of a debit card, inshallah, a bank account,
Inshallah.
and then business banking and so on. These are the steps that we need. The reasons why I'm concerned aren't around British society and so forth. I'm more concerned around technological advancements. How quickly things are evolving with regards to AI scares me a little. In 2029, we will have a reform government. It will go terribly wrong and we will reach a crash in the far right market and the boom of a more liberal way of thinking.
Assalamu alaikum. Before we begin, I just wanted to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Kestrl, the app helping Muslims to spend, save, and grow their wealth without compromise. If you download Kestrl today on the App Store or Google Play, you can order your very own watermelon-themed debit card, start generating Sharia-compliant rewards, and you can even screen your spending and your investments for companies that may not align with your ethical beliefs. So consider downloading Kestrl and begin your Muslim money journey today. Today's guest might be one of the most important people when it comes to telling stories of British Muslims. He's been in Forbes 30 Under 30 and has been quoted in publications like ITV, The Guardian, the BBC, and more. Meet Sadiq Dorasat, founder and CEO of Muslim Census, the leading source of research and insights for Muslims in the UK. He also has a background in Islamic finance, which is super helpful for this show. Having been a product manager at places like Wahed, HSBC, Evergive, and now StrideUp, where he's focused on helping Muslims to buy homes in a Sharia-compliant fashion, which is always a favorite topic on this show. I've been waiting for this guest for a long, long time. He's been dodging us, ducking us, but alhamdulillah, we managed to get him for episode 1 of season 2 of
Timing is everything.
So alhamdulillah. So without further ado, as always, I am your host, Areeb Siddiqui, and this is Muslim Money Talk. Sadiq, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a little bit nerve-wracking for us and the team because this is our first studio, our first own studio. People might notice, the people who are watching, that gone is the usual big green background that so many of you complained about. And we put a lot of work into this studio, so we'll probably do a little reveal of the studio at this point in the video.
I can see the big debit card in the background as well.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the big focus for us now. And thank you for being one of our first customers as well.
Oh yeah, no, I'm so excited, so excited.
Alhamdulillah. So yeah, I mean, throwing the script out the window for a second. Obviously, a debit card is something that's quite close to your heart because it was something that you were working on back in the day.
Yeah, I still have it in my wallet, to be.
Do you?
Yeah, genuinely.
No way.
One of the first cards or projects that I was working on at Wahed was the gold-backed debit card, and unfortunately that didn't go live. But now seeing what you guys are working on, that's why I'm so excited and actually super grateful to be part of the first batch.
Alhamdulillah, we really wanted your opinion, especially with your experience in Islamic finance and products, conventional and Islamic. It's invaluable. So thank you so much. So, going on from that, I think one of the big things that has been a real focus for your life throughout your career at Wahed or Evergive or now at StrideUp is you've been running this company, Muslim Census, in the background. And you just dropped reports, was it?
Yeah.
2 days ago, 4 days ago?
Thursday.
On Thursday?
Yeah, last week.
Okay. Entitled Muslims in Crisis.
Yeah, the title is Crisis in Belonging.
Okay.
And we surveyed almost 5,000 Muslims on kind of their opinions and lives in the UK.
So, do Muslims have a crisis in belonging?
The data would suggest yes. So there was a study done in 2016 that asked a very similar question around belonging in the UK, and about 9 in 10 said they had a strong sense of belonging in this country. 10 years later, we've done a study, and it appears that now it's just over 1 in 2. So from 9 in 10 to 1 in 2 people have that strong sense of belonging. So a massive fall. And there's numerous reasons why. A lot of people point towards the rise in far right sentiment, but also actually just their experience of living, may that be the cost of living, rising taxes, and it's all contributed to this feeling of assessing their options.
Do we even need to be here?
A lot of questions around, actually, we asked a question around, what's your sentiment of the future of the UK? Is it positive or negative? And actually only 8% had a positive sentiment of the future in this country.
So I really want to dive into the details, but before all of that, what was your motivation for asking this question? Like, where did you get the idea from for this? Because you've done a number of surveys before. We still quote your survey. I think you did it with Islamic Relief back in 2021, which was all about Muslims and in their standards of living crisis.
Correct.
Right. So where you found that nearly over 50% of Muslims are living in financial hardship in this country, with the inability to pay at least one of their bills or even using food banks. So that was a huge revelation for many people. I remember talking about that study in Saudi and people being like, "Oh, there are poor Muslims in the West." Like that was shocking to people. What was your motivation for this study?
So the motivation behind this one was, again, that study was 4 or 5 years ago. So we wanted a refresh of the numbers, seeing, 4 years on from COVID, 5 years on from like the cost of living crisis. What's the impact now, having lived through that period? But also, it's one thing saying, yes, Muslims are disproportionately impacted when it comes to financial hardship. And we knew potentially those numbers were going to paint a similar picture, which it kind of has. But what else could we add on top of that that might actually be a surprise to people reading and watching? And so we started thinking about civic engagement. And that's been a big piece, especially in the last few years, with participation in politics, whether people vote, not vote, how you vote, protesting. And there's been that real movement towards getting more involved. And so that's where we were leaning into, and mainly thinking about, okay, what derives from that? And one of the things was a sense of belonging. And it actually made perfect sense. I did the research as to what existed out there already. And there was a study that we found by Ipsos Mori in 2016, sponsored by Aziz Foundation at the time. And we thought, let's refresh these numbers.
Personally, does it speak to you? How do you feel about this personally? Because I think we've all kind of felt it when you see far right protests. Just we're sat here in central London, but just a few months ago there were over 100,000 people taking to the streets, protesting about us, about immigrants, children of immigrants, about Islam, the rise of Muslims. Do you feel personally like you belong?
100% yes. It's, with everything going on, you'd think the opposite.
Yeah.
But I see more of the community impact and the community involvement, grassroots organizations, the fact that Islamic fintechs exist and are growing and thriving, the fact that charities are existing and fundraising more than ever. I actually feel more motivated, more inspired than ever before, in actually, like, genuinely in my lifetime, that this is actually a good space for Muslims to live in.
Really? Because there's people listening right now.
Yeah.
They'll probably let us know in the comments saying, no, you got to make hijrah to Dubai. Shouts out to him.
So
Saudi, Malaysia.
We can rattle off things that have happened within the Muslim community in the last year or so that are groundbreaking, right? Muslim Tech Fest last year.
Yeah, huge.
What, over 1,000 people attended? That's massive. Never happened before. You're seeing more and more companies, the startup founders that are Muslim, that are doing incredible things.
Yeah.
But then also the number of mosques are growing, not dwindling. Pubs and clubs are turning into mosques.
Which is,
depending on your viewer, they might take that the wrong way. But in the sense of, with everything still happening and going on, impacting our community, it's almost like the foundations are growing stronger and stronger. So I actually am inspired and see my place and role firmly in this country.
What were the main findings of the survey, and were you surprised by them?
Yeah, I think some of the stats I was particularly surprised by was around how people managed their struggle with everyday expenses.
Mm.
So half, 43%, so almost half of the sample relied on borrowing.
That was shocking to me.
So credit cards, overdrafts,
Yeah.
personal loans,
Family
borrowing
loans.
from family or
Yeah.
friends. And this was just to cover everyday expenses, not to go on holidays or buy cars. This is covering everyday expenses.
Mm.
And that to me was quite shocking. Another stat that was quite shocking to me, and again, on the side of more inspiring, is yes, the sense of belonging was down, but in certain groups, it was actually high
Which
and quite strong. It was the group of those that had Islamic home financing. So we asked the question of how, what type of owner are you? Are you a homeowner? Are you a homeowner with a conventional mortgage, homeowner with an Islamic mortgage, or renting, social housing, and so forth? And the sense of belonging amongst people that ticked Islamic mortgage was the highest in the entire sample.
Do you think that might be something biased though? Because for someone to go for an Islamic mortgage, you have to have, I don't know, a certain level of self-actualization as a Muslim in this country.
Yeah.
You wanting to put down roots in this country, and also you are kind of financially able to go for an Islamic mortgage, which is more expensive than
Yeah.
a conventional one. Do you think that?
I guess so, but
Yeah.
again, it was just something worth pointing out
Yeah.
that actually that cohort has actually
It's
got a
super
very strong sense of belonging in this country.
Yeah.
And it's almost as though, like compared to conventional mortgage, you have the same sort of house that you're living in that you own.
Muslims earn 48% more than the UK average.
Yeah.
48% more.
So
Which seems so odd
Yeah.
for your first survey.
I'll caveat that, right?
Yeah.
So the stat was Muslim households earn 48% more on average than the UK household. It's because the average Muslim household is double the size of the UK household.
We have a lot more kids.
Yeah. So a lot more kids. You might see families that are multi-generational.
Yeah,
So you've got your grandparents or your parents and then your kids. So you might even have 3, maybe 4 generations living in one house. So yeah, the average household was double the size of the UK average household size. But when you work out per person, the average is slightly lower than the UK average in terms of income. It's 8% lower.
Fine. And so overall, 48% higher on average, but per person is lower.
Yeah.
43% are relying on credit of some kind, and nearly 1 in 2 feel like there's some crisis in belonging here in the UK. Their identity is being changed.
Yeah.
What's the long-term impact of this? Because Muslims, despite what Tommy Robinson and other people might say, do have a big impact in this economy. Are people really thinking of leaving? Seriously?
So, I mean, the data would suggest that people don't have a positive outlook in this country. And there are comments saying they are exploring that option. We didn't ask the question outright, are you planning to leave?
Yeah.
Because we do firmly believe that you're living in this country, you have your roots in this country, you have your kids growing up in this country potentially. We all have a certain role to play. And some of those comments were similar. We can't leave this country, this is all we know. People have lived here. There was one response actually, I've lived here for 75 years.
Oh, wow.
And they're talking about only now they're feeling like their sense of belonging is at a position where they're unsure, they're uncertain. But again, how can you tell someone that 75 years born, bred in this country to uproot? It's a massive
Of course.
thing to do and thing to ask for. So rather than thinking about options of leaving, there's a sense of duty amongst those that have the ability to do so, is how do you support those that are here? I think there's a shift. One of the questions we asked was, where do you distribute your zakat? We asked that question 4 years ago, and it was 80 to 90% of people distribute their zakat internationally, right? Abroad. Whereas in this study, 2026, it was just 40% who would solely distribute internationally. So it's actually, we're changing.
Really?
Yeah, we're changing.
40%?
40% of our sample, 4,800 people,
And other
60% had a mix. So they would do a little bit here, a little bit back home, a little bit abroad. And it's actually like a massive change in the sentiment of Muslims of, let's think about what we're doing in this country. And in this country, it might not be as obvious as feeding someone or covering the rent for someone. And yes, there's a huge kind of like need for that in this country as well. But on the other side, there's, okay, how do we advance in this country? How do we become stable in this country? How do we set our roots so that we're safe in this country? Those are all the things that I think Muslims are thinking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as we have kids, our kids are having kids. Like you say, our roots are here now. Are you worried about how politicized these surveys can get? Because obviously you're quoted in big organizations.
Yeah.
Sky News, ITV, BBC.
Yeah.
All kinds of people could get their hands on this information. And do you think it could be used by far-right political movements to say, look, remigration, this idea of getting immigrants out, they already want to leave? You know, do you worry about that?
So when we first launched Muslim Census, within the first year, we built a charter. And the charter was, the main principles were around protecting the dignity of Muslims in this country. So every stat that we put out, we're checking, double checking, what could be the impacts on our community. Is it going to be positive? Is it going to be negative? On the whole, though, the majority of our findings, we feel as though there's an obligation to share, especially if we're working with organizations that can directly influence and support those people. So, for example, Islamic Relief and National Zakat Foundation do a lot of work in this space. So publishing these findings and these numbers adds flavor, helps our community now identify a problem and tackle it in-house, right? And that's what we feel is our duty. But that sense of belonging stat, it featured on ITV News.
Yeah.
It featured in The Guardian just last week. And their article that they shared on X, ITV News shared on X, was quote tweeted. And in the space of a couple of hours, had over 1 million impressions. Right? So I was like, oh, what's going on? Let me check. Like, I thought, oh,
it's X.
I thought, oh, report's going viral. Great news. And so I looked at the quote tweets, and it was just response after response of like far right.
Yeah.
Go back home. Get out of the country then.
Yeah.
Big names that I won't name, quote tweeting and adding their 2 cents. And then the Muslim Census inbox got spammed by unpleasant messages, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm always conscious of that. And trust me, we do feel the ramifications of what we put out. And it weighs heavy on my thought process as well. But we feel as though, again, ultimately, these numbers, these stats, help Muslim organizations, Muslim grassroots communities support their own. And so that's why we put it out. We can't control the narrative on every single finding.
It sounds like such a difficult job. Really, really stressful.
For some studies that we do that are very, very delicate, very, very sensitive, we don't publish. And so we actually kind of share the findings in-house. So we have very curated audiences of whether it be Muslim organizations in the mental health space or therapists. So we're like, look, here are the findings of this report that we've done. We're not publishing it, but here's the full report. Use when you're now in conversations with people that are struggling with so and so.
So around mental health, any other topics?
Mental health, addiction,
Okay. I get you.
divorce rates.
Yeah.
Some of the numbers we've just said, look, we will present to the relevant organizations and stakeholders, whereas some that are more UK wide around poverty, around belonging, around political advocacy, because that curated audience is too big, we won't get them all. We have to push that out to the entire audience, and the only way to do that, there's no Muslim X, right?
No. Yeah.
So we have to push that out there, and we hope that for every far right person that sees it, there's going to be at least one person that has good intentions to support our community, and we feel like that benefit outweighs.
I'm just thinking how to formulate this question, but you almost like directly can influence the branding. It's almost directly influence the branding of British Muslims or UK Muslims.
Yeah.
And this idea, and I'm remembering something that Mohammed Baracha said, one of the co-founders of Nesta, when he came on the podcast, and he said that the biggest mistake Islamic Bank of Britain made was calling themselves Islamic. You know, it immediately alienated 95% of the non-Muslim population and then even the Muslim population. And I wonder if there's this idea that, do people think, when they think of, oh, Muslims in the UK, do they think of high flyers, business people, professionals, entrepreneurs? Or are they thinking of, oh, no-go areas in London? Are they thinking of people who are living on benefits, multiple kids, living in council homes, and the list goes on and gets, increasingly worse? Do you think you directly influence that?
I think our studies definitely play a part in the perception of British Muslims. I won't shy away from that. I think why we work with partners so closely is so that we're getting the source of truth of what the problems are on the ground, so that when we're formulating our surveys, we know what output would directly help the work that they're doing, right? So if we're working on spirituality and a study on assessing the spirituality of British Muslims in the UK, we'd work with the masajids, the dawah organizations, and so on and so forth, to understand what the root problems are and what they actually need data on, right? That's what gives us the confidence of doing our work and publishing our work, is because we're hearing that people need it. The Islamic Relief National Zakat Foundation came to us and said, we need these numbers to do our work to support the Muslim community better, right? They're the biggest charities that are supporting tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Muslims in this country.
Yeah.
So we take that as an opportunity to add value. And obviously, whatever we share, we take, again, as an amana of how do we do our best to protect our community, protect the dignity of our people.
Like you said. I thought that was a beautiful message. Assalamu alaikum. One small ask before we continue. We've never put the show behind a paywall, and we're not about to. Every episode, every guest, every hour of this is for free. The only thing we ask for in return is that if Muslim Money Talk has given you even one small iota of value, please hit subscribe. Most of the people who get the most out of this are already subscribed. So if you've been here for a while, it's time to make it official. Hit subscribe, hit that bell icon, drop us a like, or even better, a comment, and help build this community with us. Thank you. Now back to the show. Why did you come up with Muslim Census? Why did you want to do this? Because were you at HSBC at the time?
I was, yeah.
Okay, so should we go back into your career history? Because you studied, was it maths at Queen Mary?
Studied maths at Queen Mary.
Yeah.
Then went straight into the grad scheme at HSBC, and that's where I founded Muslim Census during the pandemic.
What was the inspiration, the spark for you?
Yeah, so I started getting a lot more involved in the charity space, from specifically Muslim charities, and soup kitchens and so forth. And I was part of like this board at one charity where we would discuss what our strategy is for, say, the next month, say next week, and it was very much, this worked before, let's do this. And it was like, how did it work? I don't know. So it was very much anecdotal
Mm.
evidence rather than any data. And in my day job, it was, if anything is agreed on data. It's not agreed on opinion. It's not agreed on anecdotes. It's agreed on data. So it was like the two worlds of way of working wasn't matching up.
Mm.
Wrongly or rightly. But at the time, I was a naive, 23, 24-year-old. And so I thought, let's find data for the Muslim community so that charities can do their work a little bit better. So I looked online, researched, I saw the same two studies quoted again and then again. Ipsos Mori, that 2016 report, and the
MCB, yeah.
British Muslims in Numbers or Muslims in Numbers report from 2015.
Mm.
So this was 5, 6, 7 years old, and people were taking it as gospel or no data.
Mm.
And so, again, naively, I thought, let's just plug that gap ourselves and start running surveys online.
You keep saying naively, but I honestly think if we weren't naive, we wouldn't have gone into this, right? That fear of knowing would have stopped us from going down an entrepreneurial route. But it didn't stop you. You went for it. And subhanAllah, look where it's landed you guys now.
Yeah. And I think we had the advantage of, because there was nothing else in the space, as soon as we published a logo, we were the leading source.
I'm true.
So in your introduction, I know you leading source. And I remember I wrote that line, right?
You did. It's on your website.
Yeah.
I didn't make that up.
But we were the leading source as soon as we launched.
The leading / only source. Okay. Understood.
But then also, because you're the only source, you get hit with a barrage of, we need your comments on this, we need you involved in this, we need you involved in that. And it was just me and my co-founder, Mohammed. And we were just kind of like, we thought we were just having a bit of fun, like trying to fix a problem here. Next thing you know, like, our first report featured in The Guardian, and I'm now speaking to journalists and they're asking me questions about our sample methodology. I'm like, oof, this is getting a little like, and I mentioned, look, we shared it on Twitter, or it was Twitter at the time. Oh, that's not the right sample methodology, and so on and so forth. So I was like, okay, we need to look into how to increase this and make this better. Then I did a qualification and we moved on from there. And you kind of like, you're almost pushed into, look, you're taking such a big role here because you're the only one. You really need to be of
top of the
standard.
Yeah.
Be of a standard. And that's probably why we struggle with new ideas actually executing. It's because there's so much pressure put on it from the very beginning, because we need this
to make it work.
It's so in demand. It's harder to make mistakes.
Yeah, of course. And I think it translates so well to your career in Islamic finance, because obviously that's another market which is quite unforgiving, to put it mildly. So you left your role at HSBC where you were in product.
Yes.
And you found yourself doing the same thing at Wahid.
Yes.
Since Wahid, you moved on to Evergive, which is this really cool Bitcoin-focused charitable donation platform. And now you find yourself at StrideUp, which is kind of reinventing the way we're doing mortgages. Really cool. We're going to get Saqib onto the podcast as well, the founder and CEO. Throughout this journey, I guess you've, I think, been in more Islamic finance organizations than anyone had on this show. So I'd love to ask you just like your opinions on the industry. How's it going? But of those companies, which did you like working for the most?
Oh my God. You can't add that.
They're all, we're going to send this to all the CEOs. So
look, they're all amazing. What I would say is, for me, I joined HSBC, young kid that really wanted to work in banking. Investment banking was the kind of dream. I grew up in East London, so driving past Canary Wharf, seeing the big buildings, it's all I really wanted to do, is say like I work in one of those buildings. It wasn't anything to do with solving problems or meeting a need. It was purely artificial, superficial.
Like most kids.
Yeah.
Same.
Once you go into Islamic finance, nothing else makes sense. Like, you only really want to work in Islamic finance for the rest of your life. That's how I find it, because you start really understanding how important money is for people that really need it. Whether it's how to buy your first home, or how to grow your savings and investments, or even just simple budgeting, you really deeply feel how important each layer is, where I didn't feel that at HSBC. Even though I was working on similar products, in the sense where I was working on a current account, savings, life insurance we were working on, it was just work. Whereas here, it's such a deeper meaning. I genuinely feel like every day I go in, I feel the reward, I feel the ajr, I feel the barakah in what I'm doing. That when I was looking for a new role, I had 2 other offers for non-Islamic companies. And it was an easy decision to make to join StrideUp, because as a Muslim, it just means so much more. When you walk into the office, what you're working on, getting customer feedback, feeling the product in your hands. And that's why, again, I'm so happy that I'm part of the Kestrl first batch, because again, it means so much more. I can see like what the big vision is, what this means for the next year, for the next 2, 5, 10 years, that I couldn't leave after I joined.
I get you. I mean, from your answer, it sounds like StrideUp is your favorite place. But okay, we'll take that as a yes. But given all your work in surveying Muslim census, what do you think is the biggest need in Islamic finance today? What should people be working on?
Yeah, I think with the most recent study that we released last week, I think there is a clear need for microfinancing. So 43% of people taking out a credit card or overdraft, personal loan to cover everyday expenses, seems like that should be a place we look into. How do we support that need? But for me, I think it's insurance, specifically life insurance. The gap that we miss out on without insurance, non-Muslims, the UK would get 3, 4, 5, 6 times their salary, or even like a lump sum that will clear off someone's mortgage. Whereas we don't have that mechanism in our community. That's probably what I'd say as a big gap. Even covering funeral costs is something that we don't have anything here to support us.
Yeah, there's always a comment in the masjid that, so and so has passed away, we're doing a collection, cover the janazah. It's just the immigrant story. Like, we've been here maybe 2, sometimes 3 generations, and we haven't really put down our roots in that way when it comes to financials. But that's what we're trying to change in these organizations. So what I'm hearing you're saying is that we're all doing the wrong thing. And we shouldn't be focusing on mortgages or investing or cars. Insurance is always a gap.
I think like home financing, car financing, debit cards, it's all important. Yeah, it's all important, and it's all the right steps in the direction. You just asked me like, what are the biggest gaps right now? I do think insurance is a massive gap.
That's exactly what I took from your survey. That and microfinancing, or some kind of credit mechanism, right? Instead of people, there's so many Muslims who rely on Klarna, buy now, pay later, or Amex, credit cards. We can do a different system. We can do it better, and it could help everyone. Having said that, of the different players, and alhamdulillah, we have so many players in the UK right now. What are you most excited about in the UK of the products which are out there today?
Not to be biased, but I'm genuinely excited to see how the Kestrel debit card
you didn't have to say
lands. No, like not scripted at all. I think to have a debit card go live, we've had a few in the last 5, 6, 7 years that teased going live and then didn't. And I'd love to see what the appetite is, especially given the last few years as well. Like a lot of people recently, if they were with one of the main high street banks, they would look at, okay, where do they invest in? And they'd find something that didn't align. And so they'd look at, okay, how I need to move. Where do I move?
I need to thank you for that as well, because obviously one thing we haven't talked about is Nama Wealth, which is a project which you set up in between after you left Wahid before you joined StrideUp.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because it was a fantastic website and screen.
Yeah, I tried my arm at founder mode. The credit to you guys is honestly so difficult. And we just created a platform that would compare existing savings accounts, existing investment products, but also compare current accounts in terms of their ethical practices. And so we had a bank screener, similar to how you guys have your ethical screener.
Yeah, that's right. But I think it was interesting because with us, it was the spending screening. So it was like, okay, part of the reason you could use a Kestrl card instead of some high street name is that the money's being invested into wars in the Middle East, and let's be open about it, funding arms development to drop bombs on Palestinian kids, as well as having the cards and the money stored with us means that as you spend, we can highlight, hey, this company is on a boycott list, this company is doing this and this and this. But the solution that you built was really, really cool. And mashallah, it's credit to you. You've built an incredible portfolio for yourself in the space, which I think is actually broader than anyone else's in the space right now. So, credit to you.
I think with that as well is, again, people highlighted they need to switch banks. But there wasn't a real alternative. Maybe a building society or so on. But then when you actually look at, okay, fine, these are customers, people on the ground, but what about our large Muslim institutions like your charities and so on? They're using HSBC, Barclays, current accounts. So imagine you might be, it's weird to think of, but you might be donating to support Gaza, an orphan in Gaza, right? And your money might be sitting in a HSBC account for 12 months. HSBC earning on that, and then
doing self-distribute.
Doing as what is aligned in theirs.
It's crazy.
And then fine, it eventually goes and supports people in Gaza. But what has it done in the 12 months? It's actually supported what's going on. And so the infrastructure needs to grow. And so that's why the launch of a debit card, inshallah, a bank account, inshallah, and then business banking and so on. These are the steps that we need because we don't have it yet.
What advice do you have for us? Because obviously you worked on a debit card product yourself before, which didn't quite take off when you were at Wahid. What advice do you have for Kestrl about what to avoid?
So firstly, I think you guys will do it much better than I tried to do.
No, inshallah, we'll see.
But what I would say is, having learned from that experience and also working in product since then, is genuinely just ship as quick as you can. Have ideas, get the people in the room that need to discuss and validate those ideas as quick as possible, and then execute on them. And then come back around the table and decide whether it's worked or not very, very quickly. Those loops need to be as short and as small as possible so that you can actually get to where you want to get to.
And so you maintain the trust of these people. A highly skeptical market, let's be honest. Did you find that, and do you still find that today, that people are really questioning how Islamic is this? How Islamic is Islamic finance? Or do you think that's fading away now?
I think it's fading. Genuinely. It might not be fading online. And because we're so plugged into the space, that's probably all we hear. Oh, this isn't so-and-so, this is like this is like that. But actually, when you speak to people who will use your product, who need your product, they're going to ask very different questions like, oh, how am I eligible for this? How can I access this? What do I need to do so-and-so? And maybe small questions and you explain and they understand. And those are the people I want to serve. The people that actually need the product rather than the theoretical people that don't need the product,
But are just loud and angry and shouting about
but
it.
have problems with the product,
Yeah.
that potentially also don't offer solutions
Yeah.
to that product as well. It's when you're not in the ring and in the arena, it's pretty easy to make comments. I've been guilty of it. Like, but when you're so deep into it,
I get it.
then you really understand, like, okay, what's the big mission here? What's the vision? We're trying to make people have homes that they can live in, retire with dignity and confidence in, and also that they can pass on to their children, so that that attainment or that gap closes, right? That's what we're trying to do.
And there's ultimately belonging.
Exactly.
Going back to our theme.
Exactly. So it's much bigger meaning.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so interesting that you say that, and you've landed in one of the most hotly spoken about spaces, which is mortgages,
Yes.
Islamic mortgages. And I think that's where most of the criticism is levied against, because whether we like it or not, they are more expensive. They are more expensive than conventional.
Yeah.
Is there a plan at StrideUp, if you can speak about it, to bring down that cost? Or is the idea we're going to focus on the technology, the convenience, all of the other aspects we can tackle?
Our rates drop all the time.
Mm.
Anywhere we have margin to do so, we do. But it's almost like comparing apples and oranges, right? You're comparing Islamic home financing to conventional, right? When you're making those comparisons, which are two very different structures, very different products, right? So to say one should be similar price to the other is almost like saying something very different should be similar to something very different. But even still, with scale and as cost of financing falls, the first thing that will fall with that is our rates.
And I always go back to this story. People, listeners might be tired of me telling this, is that when Islamic mortgages came out in Malaysia for the first time, they were more expensive. They were more expensive than the conventional. The difference was that people backed it. There was a few loud voices saying, oh, is it really Islamic? People taking advantage. But they did back it. And now where we are 40, 50 years later, they're now on par and in some cases cheaper.
Yeah.
Because the cost of capital was there. People actually put their money with Islamic banks. That caused the rates to come down.
Yeah.
So I think going back to what Mohammed Faraja actually said about, can we make a product that's for everyone? Because if we are a minority in this country for now, despite what Pew Research and other organizations might say was going to happen by 2050, then we need to make products that appeal to non-Muslims as well.
Yeah. I agree, but fundamentally our products are very different. And so for a non-Muslim to take up a Islamic home financing plan when potentially they don't have those same restrictions, if it's more expensive, I can't initially see why they would. And so yes, potentially what needs to happen is for the non-Muslims, for scale to arrive in the market and for that price gap to close.
But perhaps different products could appeal to different sets. So for example, if you could have a better, really good rate, which is funded by a higher cost to the mortgage, a lot of non-Muslims do go for that. We've seen that at Gatehouse, we've seen that at Al Rayyan.
Yes.
So maybe that's the way to do it. Yeah, interesting.
Potentially.
Okay.
But what I would say is that the gap now isn't as big as people make out. It might be a couple of hundred a month. And then it comes into the question of, okay, so for a couple of hundred a month, are you going to go down conventional route or the certified Islamic route? I compare it to, and again, people don't like this example, but I do compare it to, if you walk into a restaurant and you see a non-halal steak for £10 and you see the HMC certified steak for £13, one is impermissible. One, you might have question marks over HMC. How did they kill? How did they start?
Yeah.
But it's HMC certified, right?
Yeah.
So there might be still disagreements here and there, but on the whole, this is an Islamic product and this is the on the whole, everyone agrees that this is the non-Islamic product for a couple of £100 now. Is that worth a decision? It's a decision.
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
decision upon you to make that.
I do like that. A lot of people call that example a little reductive, but I like it. I quote that a lot. If it was food, if it was chicken, this debate wouldn't exist. People would still go for it, support it, and economies of scale would eventually take place. Okay, we're running a little short on time. Appreciate your time as well doing this. So I wanted to go to a few rapid fire questions.
So,
Number one, starting off in conventional or starting off in Islamic? Which one do you push for as a career?
as a new person
Entering the workforce.
I'd say starting off in it doesn't need to be conventional finance. It could be product, it could be big tech, it could be wherever it is. But I feel like initially you need a bit of experience because Islamic finance is so new. You need a bit of established experience, especially on your CV.
Yeah.
So you can come in and immediately add value.
Bigger brand names, but also you learned a lot at HSBC, which serves you to this day, serves you at Muslim Census. Going back to that thing, you saw the way things were done at HSBC, and it was not happening in the charity space over here. So no, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it is the case. I follow what Horace Rafan says on this, which is, we just don't have the kinds of roles available in Islamic finance. I'm saying that as one of our grads is sat in the room to this day. It is his first role in Islamic finance, but I hope we're giving you a good experience, Yusuf. He's nodding his head. So yeah, I think conventional is the way to go as well. And it does help with that idea of belonging and perception of people. But people treat us very differently when they see us wearing suits as opposed to like a hoodie and jeans, So that perception I think is important still in this country. Okay, next question. Personal brand building. I've always admired you, mashallah, for the way that you've done this. You're very big on X. You've dabbled in TikTok with
Dabbling.
some mixed success there. We don't need to go into that. How important is personal branding?
I think it's super important, especially in this modern day where it's easier to build, but it's even harder to cut through noise and build an audience, build a community, deliver a message. Amount of AI slop we see.
Yeah.
It's so hard to like stick out now. And so I really do think building a brand is up there with building a product.
Okay. And any tips for people? Is X still the place to do it?
I don't use X anymore.
Do you not?
No. Because like I mentioned, it's too noisy.
Yeah. And very toxic.
It's very toxic. I share the Muslim Census reports there, and that's all I do.
Really?
And the backlash that we get off that, I always I say, alhamdulillah, I don't use this platform and kind of consume that energy every single day.
Wow.
And that's why I've pivoted to mainly I use LinkedIn and TikTok. And it's
how is Muslim TikTok?
I think it's almost like where it's at. Like it's
really?
It's where trends evolve.
Yeah.
It's where it's like how Twitter was maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
It's where ideas are born. Like that's where the trends happen. So that, and then it kind of like passes off to other platforms.
Yeah.
That's what I've found.
How is the kind of marriage side of Muslim TikTok? I'm trying to. What are you alluding to?
It depends. It depends on the character of the individuals that post.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm there to talk about personal finance.
Yes.
Because you go where the audience is. That's from the times of the Sahaba to today.
That's very true.
If you have a message, you go to where people are to convey that message. I know I'm making TikTok very deep here, making it sound super important, but that's how I convince myself to post regularly. I think because I feel like I'm doing a service.
I agree with you. I mean, if it wasn't for TikTok, and I think mainly TikTok over Instagram, because videos weren't as censored on TikTok, a lot of people would not be aware of the plight of the Palestinian people or what was happening in Sudan, or even what's happening to the Uyghurs. And so I know they couldn't post themselves, but it's a huge educational platform for a lot of people. There's still Palestinians and families that I follow to this day who are posting regularly, and I can check that they're alive
100%
by posting on that.
100%.
So I think that is where the battleground is. I think it's changing now that in America, I think the CEO of Palantir bought TikTok, so they're starting to phase certain things out. But in the UK, it is still what it is.
Yeah.
How optimistic are you for British Muslims and the youth? I mean, you've just become a father, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Are you okay with me saying that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Of course.
You just become a father. I think we're similar age, similar stages of our lives. Are you optimistic for the next gen?
I am. The reasons why I'm concerned aren't around British society and so forth. I'm more concerned around technological advancements.
Really?
So how quickly things are evolving with regards to AI scares me a little. This chase for AGI, and you've got founders of the big companies saying that essentially all skilled professional work can be automated, can be done via an AI. They're the things that kind of concern me. Concern me for myself and my career, but also for, okay, what is my daughter really gonna like specialize in? What's she gonna do? Like, how's she gonna earn? What's her way of learning gonna be like when she's at school? Because knowledge, education is gonna be structured so differently. That's what concerns me. I think life will be as it is for us, hopefully a lot better. I think my guess on this is that in 2029 we will have a reform government, and it will go. Hang on. It will go terribly wrong.
Yeah.
And we will reach a crash in the far right market.
Yeah.
And the boom of essentially a more liberal way of thinking. And there will be an uprising of left-wing politics, essentially, which again comes with its own challenges.
Of course.
But I feel like my daughter, when she's, at school, I think life will be very different to what it is today and over the next 5 years.
I think it's interesting. There was a report, a survey, a report that was done recently, which showed that basically the study was asking AI agents across the spectrum from Claude to Gemini to compete with workers on, I think it was Fiverr, right? Across different industries, some in architecture, video editing, compliance, financial services, all of that. In 96% of cases, more than 96% of cases, human beings outperform the AI nearly every time.
Nice.
The cases where it did not happen were on certain things, creative things, video editing, photo editing, but in most cases the quality was very poor. It was rife with mistakes. So I agree with you. I think things are going to change over the decades.
Yeah.
Today, though, I think
When was that study done?
last week,
Okay.
or 2 weeks ago.
Okay, cool.
There's a great video done by Cold Fusion, if anyone follows him on YouTube, where he talks about it in detail.
Yeah.
So yeah, this was only a couple of weeks ago, but it was done.
Because I feel like our era right now, so say over the next couple of years, it will feel like humans have superpowers, right? I feel like I have superpowers at work.
Yeah, I get it.
In my 9 to 5 and outside, I feel like I can do any task genuinely with AI. I'm subscribed to Claude, ChatGPT, Replit, Gamma, Gemini. I have all the subscriptions. I've literally got an AI, what's it called, category on Monzo that like categorizes my spending, and I see it. I'm bored. And it enables us. It like completely superpowers us, right? But in a few years' time, will that superpower merge into actually replacement?
Yeah.
They're my fears.
Crossing from time saver to replacement. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, that's really interesting. How are you using it in product?
Oh, for almost everything I do.
Really?
Yeah, generally. So product is it's a mixture of the scientific and art, right? For the art side, it relies on a product person to have taste. How should an experience be? How should a customer feel? What are we trying to achieve? But even those taste conversations, I'm having conversations with Claude, right? So there's a feature where you can essentially just have a conversation. And so on my commutes to work or commutes back, whatever it is, headphones in, and I'm actually having a conversation. It might sound crazy to people walking past me.
But they're not going to know.
They might think, I was speaking so.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So, and we're fleshing out ideas together,
Yeah.
right? Then now it understands the whole context of what I'm trying to build. It can build out a PRD, product requirements document, but also a prototype very quickly.
Really?
Absolutely.
That looks good. Because I've tried Lovable, I've tried a few.
That looks on the lower side of okay.
Okay, but
right?
something that a tech team would understand.
This isn't for me to ship.
Yeah.
I'm a product person,
Yeah.
right? This is for me to give context to our designer, other members of the team, our engineers, and basically pitch the idea. But I've not had to do anything apart from just think, right? And speak. And all of a sudden I have a PRD that I can present and a prototype that I can present that helps now the knowledge workers take on what they need to do. But then also I can build out the financial model of, okay, what's the movement of what I'm going to do, any KPIs, OKRs that impact it. Everything it's like, I feel like I'm living in, I don't know, like a different century. It just feels how I was working 2 years ago to today is day and night difference. And that's why I feel like, for example, the Muslim Census report. Muslim Census, the team is very, very, very small, right? StrideUp, the team is very small. The reason why you're seeing now teams of 10, 12, 15 compete with teams of hundreds is because of AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've got a lot of tips for how to use product at Kestrl. Very much. Because I've been using it for the research bit, but using it for a whole PRD, use it to make a whole design prototype. That's very interesting.
You honestly use it for everything. If you're not using it for everything, you're missing out. Because yes,
but do you think there's? I really believe this, that a human being who puts enough effort and time and energy and resource and just passion into something will always come up with something better than the AI. But there's a difference here, is that you're using it, you're not relying on it. It's just doing some of the heavy lifting for you.
So the ideas come from you.
Yeah.
Always, like, they're not going to have great ideas. They're not going to have great taste. But when you give them the context and give them your ideas of what is good taste and what a few pointers, then they'll spit out a few things. Half of it might be wrong. Half of it might be rubbish. But like, maybe like there's a little bit that's like, oh, hang on. Now zoom in on this.
Yeah.
Let me give you my thoughts on this now.
Yeah.
Here's how I would do it. And then it will go again. And then I'm not saying it replaces design and it doesn't replace engineers. Actually, partially, engineers heavily rely on it. Designers heavily rely on it. But then they're now the expertise where they're doing their design work with AI. They might use different tools. Engineers will use different tools.
Yeah.
So they'll have the same back and forth that I'm doing from a product perspective, from a design and engineering perspective. So we're all just this completely superpowered team that is shipping and shipping stuff super quickly. Like, for example, the research piece and the PRD and the impact on OKRs, I can give that to a product person and they might do, an amazing product person might do it in 2 weeks, right? Like a big feature that needs all stakeholder buy-in, that needs engineering to give an effort, sizing, design to build out a prototype, maybe 2 weeks. I can do it in an hour. It doesn't make any sense. Even if mine might not be as good as what that person does in 2 weeks.
But speed is everything.
Speed is absolutely everything when it comes to product, especially today.
And for Muslims.
And for Muslims. Absolutely. So you've got even more of an onus to move so quick, to ship so quickly that,
Well, I hope the listeners are finding this as useful as I'm finding it. My final question for you before we close up is, do Muslims really belong in the UK?
One word answer, absolutely yes.
Okay. And if you're not convinced, then let us know in the comments. All right. Sadiq, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.
Salam. Take care.
Thank you so much for checking out the latest episode of Muslim Money Talk. If you like what you heard, you may like the Kestrl app even better. Kestrl's mission is to help Muslims to grow their wealth without compromising on their beliefs. It's available on the App Store and Google Play today. If you download it, you can order your very own watermelon-themed debit card. You can begin spending in an ethical manner where we'll filter out anything that doesn't align with your beliefs, generate Sharia-compliant rewards, and even be in with a chance for winning an all-expense-paid trip to Umrah. We do those giveaways regularly. So download and try it for yourself today, and see you on the next episode. Assalamu alaikum.